Hey guys, tonight we tiptoe into a castle where the candles burn low and the walls are thick with whispers. A draft rustles the crimson drapes, and the scent of beeswax, damp stone, and old books clings to the air like a secret. Servants shuffle in the background, heads bowed low, carrying silver trays as the great hall buzzes with muffled gossip. You probably wouldn't survive if you lived there. The politics alone would finish you off, not to mention the family drama. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing inside the mind of medieval royalty. Not literally, of course, but close enough. The velvet robes, the jeweled collars, the polished armor. It all dazzles under flickering torchlight. But underneath the glittering surface lies something quietly disturbing. You notice it first in the portraits. The noses that curve too sharply, the jaws too prominent, the eyes set just a little too far apart, or maybe a little too close. Royal blood, they say, pure, sacred, unbroken. But as you follow the bloodline deeper, you begin to wonder if unbroken was really such a good idea. You slip past a massive tapestry and into the private chambers of the royal family. Everything here is built to impress, but also to isolate. Gold frame mirrors reflect nothing but hollow stares. That's when you see the family tree, stitched into a hanging embroidered in silk and thread. You step closer. Wait, that can't be right. You blink and lean in. The same names appear again and again. Siblings marrying cousins, uncles marrying nieces, one queen listed as both mother and aunt. The branches don't branch, they loop. This isn't a family tree, it's a pretzel. Welcome to the tangled history of Europe's most inbred noblewomen. Your journey tonight will not be gentle. It will be soft and slow. Yes, but filled with quiet horror. These women were not monsters. They were made that way, shaped by dynasties obsessed with keeping power inside the bloodline. They were paraded in gilded carriages, praised for their purity, then married off to men who looked a little too much like their uncles. You trail your fingers along a velvet drape and overhear a tutor murmuring something about genetic bottlenecks. He doesn't know the term. Of course, he's a man of God. But he recognizes the symptoms: delayed speech, seizures, strange facial proportions, and short lifespans. The nuns say it's God's will. The doctors blame the mother. But neither points to the real culprit: incest. The air in this place is thick, not just with candle smoke, but with denial. Everyone knows, but no one dares speak it aloud. That's the royal way. You drift into the nursery wing, and the silence deepens. A young princess stares vacantly at a doll, her tongue lolling slightly. She's been slow since birth. Another child, just a few years older, rocks back and forth near the fireplace, muttering prayers she doesn't understand. Nannies smile, court musicians play flutes, and the king orders more paintings to show how healthy the heirs look. You know better. But it wasn't always like this. Not entirely. You follow time backward, stepping through corridors of memory, to an era before the worst of the inbreeding took hold. You stand at the dawn of the Habsburg dynasty, when political marriages were more about land than blood. But somewhere along the line, the idea of keeping it in the family stopped being metaphorical. At first, it seemed harmless. A cousin here, a niece there. Royal blood is rare, after all. Who else would understand the burden of a crown? But the line narrowed, and narrowed, until the family had fewer options than a lonely island. You pass through a hall of portraits. Each face looks vaguely familiar, like they've all been painted by the same hand. The women wear expressions that range from dull resignation to quiet sadness. None of them smile with their teeth. Some can't. Historians still argue, you hear a courtier whisper, whether it was ambition or ignorance that drove them. You suspect it was both, and yet not all is dark. You peer out a frost-glazed window and glimpse the city below, the people outside the palace, whose bloodlines twist freely, whose children run and laugh without the weight of royal expectations pressing on their chests. But for the women inside, there is no escape. You are dressed in velvet tonight, corseted tight, and you walk with grace because that's what's expected. You are a princess, or worse, a queen, and your only value lies in whom you marry and what you bear. And if what you bear is wrong, then you pray harder. You light more candles. You beg the saints. You never ever blame the blood. Because in this world, to question the bloodline is to question God. You feel the weight of a crown settling on your head, not made of gold, but of expectation, legacy, and centuries of bad decisions. You will walk through this entire world tonight. You will meet the women who were born too close to power, and much too close to each other. You will hear their names, their tragedies, and, sometimes, their quiet defiance. You'll step into their velvet slippers, wear their gowns, sit at their banquet tables and listen to the slow unraveling of their minds, and all the while, you'll carry that quiet question with you. Was the throne really worth it? The air grows colder as you drift deeper into the ancestral halls. You hear your slippers brush across mosaic floors where time has worn the tiles uneven. Above you, chandeliers creak softly, their crystal arms trembling with drafts that whisper through the gaps in stone. A portrait at the end of the corridor draws you near. His name is Philip the Handsome, or so they called him. He stares down at you with the faintest smirk, a thick jawline, a nose just slightly too large for the rest of his face. Not yet the full expression of what's to come, but the foundation is laid. This is where the Habsburg chin begins its long, unfortunate reign. You follow his lineage like a slow river winding through centuries. The Habsburgs, masters of empire, marriage, and inconvenient genetics. They don't fight for power. They marry for it, over and over again. Your footsteps echo through the great gallery, walls lined with the faces of daughters promised to cousins and sons, fated to wed nieces. You begin to recognize patterns, not just in politics or alliances, but in the bone. Their jaws grow longer, their tongues thicker, eyes droop at odd angles. You pause beside the portrait of Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor. His face is all angles and sadness. One lip droops downward in a permanent sneer. Though he isn't sneering, that's just how his muscles lie. A whisper reaches your ear from a passing scribe, murmuring of a mandibular prognathism. You blink. It sounds like a curse. And maybe it is. The Habsburg curse, passed from generation to generation, like a treasured heirloom nobody wants to admit they hate. They call it the Habsburg jaw now. Doctors write papers about it. Sculptors struggle to portray it without offense. But in this time, it's not yet a problem. Not officially, not until Charles's great-great-grandson arrives. But you're not there yet. First, you must meet his daughter. You step through a narrow door, low and dark, a private chamber, small for a princess, but then again, this isn't a happy story. Joanna of Castile, later known as La Loca, Joanna the Mad, but tonight, you see her not as a diagnosis, but as a girl, a daughter, a wife, a queen. She's seated at a writing desk, staring blankly at a sealed letter she cannot bring herself to open. Her fingers tremble, not from weakness, but from holding too much in for too long. Her mother, Isabella, is strict. Her father, Ferdinand, strategic. Love wasn't part of her upbringing, duty was. And yet, Joanna falls deeply, dangerously in love with Philip the Handsome. He is everything she has been told to want, beautiful, royal, and utterly disinterested in her. You walk beside her on cold palace tiles as she follows him through Europe, growing more paranoid with each whisper, each glance he throws at another woman. Joanna doesn't sleep. She clings to him, screams in the night, wails at the door when he locks her out. The court begins to murmur. Madness, they say. Too much passion in that blood. You know better. Joanna's mind is breaking under the weight of betrayal, loss, and the ceaseless pressure of being royal, female, and alone. But the whispers don't stop. They echo in her skull until even silence sounds like accusation. Then Philip dies, and Joanna, already frayed, splits entirely. She refuses to bury him. She rides through the countryside with his coffin, opening it nightly to kiss his decaying face. Her entourage travels by moonlight, so no woman might tempt her dead husband in the day. A quiet horror settles over you, not just at her grief, but at the family's reaction. They imprison her. For decades, you trail behind as they move her from castle to monastery, always behind stone, always behind silence. She outlives her father, her son, even her granddaughter. But she never leaves her locked world. Historians still argue whether Joanna was truly mad or merely inconvenient, a queen too difficult to control, a woman too damaged to be displayed. Either way, the bloodline moves forward, and you follow it. Back in the Grand Hall, the Habsburgs marry again. The tree folds inward once more. Cousins, uncles, nieces, looping like thread pulled too tight. You feel it, don't you? The tension? It's subtle, but insistent. Like a violin string stretched just past its limit. It hasn't snapped, not yet, but you're getting closer. And the chin keeps growing. You pass another portrait. The jaw juts forward. The lower lip hangs. And still. The court insists, a noble profile. There's a sort of denial baked into the marble here. A refusal to admit that what makes them powerful is also making them sick. But beauty isn't the goal. Lineage is. A pure line. Royal blood. Untainted by peasants. You glance into a mirror framed with gold. For a moment, you see your own face reflected, but with that chin, that drooping lip, that eye turned ever so slightly inward, and you shiver. This isn't just history. It's a warning stitched into bone. But you're still walking, still drifting down velvet corridors with portraits on every wall. Women who bear the crown and the burden. You can almost hear them whispering, "Be good, be quiet, marry your cousin." And when they break, when their minds unravel or their babies die in the crib, no one blames the tree. Not yet. But you will soon. You don't notice the change in temperature at first, but the stillness gives it away. The draft is gone. The air is warm now, too warm, thick like wool. You press forward through a narrower hallway, where tapestries hang so low they brush your shoulders, whispering threads against your skin. This part of the castle doesn't echo. It absorbs. You've entered the private chambers of a young woman the court once called regal, radiant, and a royal prize. But here, far from the portraits and courtiers, she is just a daughter of tragedy. Her name is Joanna's daughter, and her name is also Maria of Spain, and Isabella Clara Eugenia, and Anne of Austria, and countless others, because you quickly learn that in these families, names repeat just as much as the bloodlines do. But tonight, you stop beside one in particular. Her name is Maria of Austria, and she was never supposed to be extraordinary. You find her at a dressing table. The room is silent except for the creak of the chair as she shifts her weight. Her hair is being brushed by a servant, one careful stroke at a time. Her eyes are blank, not with defiance or boredom, but fatigue. Born to Maximilian II and Maria of Spain, double cousins. Let that sink in. Her parents shared both sets of grandparents. The same grandfather appears twice on her family tree. You try to draw it in your mind and end up creating a circle. You blink. You realize that Maria is not the exception. She is the product. She was born in 1528, baptized with gold, and immediately placed on a chessboard of alliances. You can almost hear the voices already arguing over where to send her, who she will wed, how many heirs she will need to produce. But there is a problem. She is sickly, fragile. Her body falters in ways no one will name. She tires easily. She bruises often. She speaks with effort. You stand at the edge of her childhood chamber and watch her try to lift a golden goblet, an act that takes both hands and a whispered breath. Her father says nothing. Her mother prays harder. You already know how this goes. They marry her off anyway. To her uncle. Yes, you heard right. Her uncle, Philip II of Spain, her mother's brother, his own niece. She is 18. He is 40. The court throws petals, trumpets blare, and 1,000 painted fans flutter in celebration. The marriage is hailed as divinely ordained, a triumph of diplomacy and family unity. But as you sit at the back of the wedding banquet, you feel the unease settle behind your ribs like a stone. You glance at the royal couple seated on thrones draped in velvet. She smiles because she must. He smiles because he's won. No one talks about the risks. No one says the word inbreeding. Not yet. But you see it. In the way Maria winces when she stands. In the tremble of her fingers as she tries to hold a fork. In the stiff way her eyes track a servant across the room. They call it nerves, or piety, or delicate femininity. You know better. You walk with her to her new home, the Spanish court, where she is queen now, but watched like a child. She prays constantly, fasts obsessively, and spends long hours in darkened chapels, not because she's especially devout, but because the darkness gives her relief from pain. Still, she does her duty. She becomes pregnant, and then again, and again. But none of the babies survive. The first is born too early. The second, blue and silent. The third lives for weeks, then stops breathing one night in his cradle. You sit with her in the nursery afterward, the nurse having finally left. Her hands are clenched in her lap, white with pressure, as she stares at nothing. The cradle is still. There is no crying in this palace, not from babies, not from queens. Historians still argue whether Maria's losses were divine punishment, medical tragedy, or the inevitable result of that tangled family tree. But tonight, you don't argue, you only observe. Her husband marries again, another niece, another alliance. He continues producing heirs, some live, some do not. But Maria fades, quietly, gracefully, like a flame allowed to burn itself out. You attend her funeral years later, a simple mass, dignified. Her name is etched in marble, but the lineage rolls on without pause. Another niece, another cousin, another daughter. The blood moves forward, and you move with it. You pass through a side corridor now, one you haven't noticed before. Dusty, quieter. The portraits here are smaller, less regal. You run your hand along a stone wall and realize the pattern. The faces here are all women, and all the same face. Not exactly, but close enough to unsettle you. The chin, the eyes, the slightly tilted nose. You pause in front of one. It looks like Maria, but it's not. It's her daughter, or her cousin, or both. Their identities blur, their fates repeat, the gowns change, the titles shuffle, but the bloodline keeps its shape, a closed circle, no fresh branches, only coils. You take a deep breath, and the air smells like roses and something darker underneath. Rot, maybe, or memory. The scent thickens as you descend a narrow spiral staircase, the stone worn smooth by centuries of silk shoes and silent footsteps. A draft creeps along your spine, the air shifting from velvet suffocating to damp and sharp. You descend into the heart of the royal forge, not of iron, but of marriage contracts. Here, in these archives, vaulted chambers stacked with parchment and perfume wax seals, you watch history fold in on itself. Scrolls lie open, listing names that twist in familiar patterns. Margaret marries Philip. Philip marries Isabella. Isabella is his cousin, and Margaret's niece. You pause, reread. It makes less sense the slower you go. A scribe shuffles past you, muttering as he dips his quill. Cousins again? He sighs. Always cousins? You drift beside him as he prepares another draft, sealing the fate of 2 more teenagers with a bloodline too tangled to unknot. This time, it's the match between Philip III and Margaret of Austria. Yes, another Margaret. Of course. She's the daughter of Charles II of Styria, yet another Habsburg branch folded right back into itself. She's 15 when they arrange the match. Philip is her cousin. The tree circles again. You stand at the balcony, watching fireworks crackle over the river as the wedding procession begins. Everyone is smiling. Everyone is dressed in silk and silver. But you hear the whispers under the music. Too close, someone murmurs. Again. But the match proceeds. The union is holy, they say, preordained, and so it is consummated with great ceremony and much prayer. The result? 8 children, only 2 survive. You sit beside Margaret years later, watching her rock back and forth in a gilded chair, rosary beads whispering through her fingers. She has aged quickly. Her eyes are ringed in shadows. Her lips, always pale, are nearly blue. She has become the perfect Habsburg queen, obedient, devout, and exhausted. But her legacy is already growing. One of her surviving daughters, Maria Anna, is soon promised to her own uncle. You glance at the marriage document. The ink is still drying. You turn away, and then you hear the drums. War drums. The problem with marrying your cousins to keep the power in the family is that your enemies become your family too. You walk into the War of the Spanish Succession, a disaster born not from hatred, but inheritance. The Spanish throne is now a game of musical chairs played by intermarried bloodlines. Each claimant has a valid argument, because they all share the same grandparents. The French Bourbon line wants it. The Austrian Habsburgs demand it. England and the Dutch Republic panic. Why? Because Europe can't handle one royal family ruling 2 empires, especially not a family this fragile. You find yourself in the war room now. Maps stretched across long tables. Tiny carved horses and cannons pushed into place by pale fingers. Diplomats argue, red-faced, priests wring their hands, soldiers sharpen blades, and through it all, the women, these queens, these archduchesses, these pawn princesses, stand quiet in the background. None of this was their choice. You pause in the hallway as a messenger rushes past. Another cousin has died. Another claim to the throne dissolved. You sit with the widows, all of them cousins, all of them mourning husbands who look too much like their brothers. One of them, blonde and barely out of childhood, clutches a handkerchief embroidered with the initials of her own name, and her husband's. They are the same. Still, the marriage arrangements continue. Another match, another set of cousins. This time, They say, "It will work." This time, they pray. The children will be strong. You drift through a baptismal chamber where incense curls in the air and bells ring faintly in the distance. A baby is dipped into a marble basin. His eyes are crossed, his breathing ragged, but he is royal, and so the court celebrates. You know what they don't want to admit? This isn't destiny, it's design. Historians still argue whether the royals knew what they were doing, whether they understood how close was too close. But these halls hold their own secrets. You climb a quiet stairwell now, lit only by a thin window of blue glass. The sunlight filters in, turning everything cold and dreamlike. You arrive at a small room, a study. Here, old medical books line the shelves. Scribbled drawings of bone structures, notes on temperament and blood, early theories of heredity scratched in the margins. You run your finger along a passage underlined in red. The sins of the parent become the burdens of the child. You close the book and exhale. You're beginning to feel it now, that subtle nausea, not from the stories, but from the repetition, the sameness, the circular dance that refuses to end. The same names, the same blood, the same fate. Your steps grow heavier. You re-enter the portrait hall, but this time, you don't need the plaques. You recognize the faces. You know that chin, that expression, that slightly strained posture of a woman carrying a child who might not live. You know her already. You've met her a dozen times, in a dozen different dresses, with a dozen different names. She is the woman born into a dynasty that treats daughters like currency and genetics like theology. She is Margaret, Maria, Anna, Isabella, and she's still waiting in the nursery for a child who will outlive her. You keep walking. The floor beneath you creaks, not from disrepair, but from the weight of everything it remembers. The creaking fades as you move into another wing of the palace, this one draped in quiet sorrow. The air shifts again, dimmer, more reserved. Candles flicker low against the stone, their flames straining toward a ceiling too high to see. It feels like a chapel, but no one is praying. They've prayed enough. You've come to visit Margaret of Austria, though it's not your first time seeing her. You've passed her before, at court, during ceremonies, painted in oil and wrapped in royal blues. But here, now, you find her stripped of all that. She sits alone, not with advisors, not with ladies in waiting, alone. Her hands are folded in her lap, her fingers laced tight like she's holding herself together. Margaret is no stranger to loss. She was married at the age of 3, widowed by 13, and never truly allowed to be a girl in the first place. Her life was traded in treaties before she could even spell her name. You step beside her as she stares into the cold hearth. The fire's gone out. She hasn't asked for it to be relit. She's remembering. You feel it. Her first marriage was to John of Castile, son of Isabella and Ferdinand, the rising power couple of Spain. The wedding was lavish, the expectations immense. She was 10, he was 18. They said it would unite empires. Instead, it unraveled her. John died barely 6 months into their marriage. Margaret, still barely a child, was left behind in a foreign court, wearing widow's black before she ever wore silk in spring. You follow her back to her homeland. She returns to the Habsburg court not as a princess, but as a political inconvenience. What does one do with a widowed child? Bride? Simple. You marry her again. This time, it's Philibert II of Savoy. A slightly better match, closer in age, at least, but just as strategic. He dies too. So, here she sits, in a velvet chair that seems too big for her frame, having buried 2 husbands and several children. But she's not broken. You notice that? She may be silent, but her spine is straight, Her eyes, red-rimmed, yes, still burn with something cold and alert. Margaret has spent her life playing a game no one taught her the rules to. But she's learned. They try to marry her again. She refuses. Politely, firmly. Instead, she becomes governor of the Netherlands, a position her father reluctantly grants, assuming she'll manage it for a few years until someone finds another groom. But she never steps aside. You watch her stride through drafty halls in Brussels now, her cloak trailing behind her like a shadow. She rules with grace, diplomacy, and an iron patience that makes grown men flinch. When ambassadors arrive, she listens longer than she speaks. When letters come, she reads them twice before responding. She becomes, somehow, the most powerful Habsburg woman of her generation. But power doesn't make her immune. You stand beside her again, years later now, on a cold morning cloaked in fog. A child's cradle rests behind her. Another loss. The baby had seemed strong. They'd prayed. They'd fed him holy milk and bathed him in blessed water. Still, he died. And still, Margaret rules. You admire her, even as you ache for her. She's one of the few whose mind doesn't unravel. She doesn't lock herself in towers or kiss the lips of dead husbands. She doesn't weep before courtiers or lose herself in candlelit grief. Instead, she builds schools, churches, hospitals, but you notice the way her gowns hang looser as the years go by. She eats less. She walks slower. Her body, too, is a map of inherited cost. Even the strong ones don't escape the blood. You sit beside her as she writes to her nephew, Charles V, the Emperor. She signs her name with a hand that trembles just slightly. The letter is full of advice, political nuance, familial warnings. But between the lines, you read something else. Do not make the same choices. But I know you will. Historians still argue whether Margaret of Austria ever truly had a choice at all. You walk with her to her final resting place, a quiet crypt, no grand monuments, no towering angel statues, just a carved slab with her name and a worn rosary folded neatly on top. The air is still. You feel the weight of all she carried, duty, dynasty, disappointment. You remember the way she refused to marry again, the way she governed, the way she wrote letters filled with steel. And you realize she may have been the only woman in this family who left something behind that wasn't broken. You rise, and the silence breaks. The bells are ringing again. A wedding? Of course, because no matter how much Margaret tried to warn them, the family continues. The next girl is ready. The next contract is signed, and the bloodline loops once more. You step back into the corridor, and the faces are there again, blushing brides, nervous eyes, gilded collars that hide choking throats. You pause before one. She looks like Margaret, but her name is Maria, or Anna, or Isabella. You know her already. You always do. Your footsteps are slower now, not from weariness, but from something heavier, a quiet dread that settles in your chest like mist, unshakable but soft. You walk through another corridor, this one lined with windows too narrow to see through properly. They let in streaks of morning light, as if the building itself is reluctant to reveal too much. You've reached a turning point, the part of the story where inbreeding stops being subtle. The faces change here, the gowns are newer, but the jaws are longer, the eyes somehow dimmer. You stop in front of a child's portrait. At first glance, she seems angelic, rosy cheeks, golden hair curled to perfection. But something's wrong. The proportions, the tilt of the head, the vacant expression. You step back. It's Maria of Spain. Another Maria. Yes, but this one's different. Born in 1606, the daughter of Philip III of Spain and Margaret of Austria, the same Margaret you just left behind. You recall her steady hand, her iron poise. Now, here is her daughter, born into a world no longer pretending things are fine. Maria of Spain is beautiful, fragile, and dying from the inside out. She is married to her first cousin, Ferdinand III. The bloodline folds in again, same as always. But the consequences arrive faster now. Maria suffers from seizures, from fevers no doctor can explain, from pregnancies that never reach full term. Her body was born to be royal, but not to survive. You walk beside her as she crosses a freezing stone courtyard in Vienna. Her attendants cluster close, trying to shield her from the chill. She smiles, stiffly, at the archbishop, and then collapses before anyone can catch her. They whisper that she's weak, sensitive, delicate, the usual lies. But you see what the physicians won't admit. Her organs are failing, one by one, and still, they push her to bear children, again and again. She tries. You see her lying in bed, clutching her abdomen, teeth clenched. A midwife sobs quietly in the corner. Blood stains the linens. No cries echo from the cradle. She tries again. This time, the child lives. A boy, thin, pale, with fingers like bird bones and skin so translucent you can see the veins beneath. He won't survive childhood. Maria grows paler with each passing month, her eyes glassy, her voice reduced to a whisper. You sit with her during her last confession. The room is dark except for one flickering candle. She breathes in shallow rasps, each one like a tiny surrender. The priest says something about heaven. She says nothing. She dies at 26. The court announces it was a fever. They write long, eloquent tributes about her beauty, her grace, her devotion to God. No one mentions her blood, but you already know. You step through the black-draped halls as morning bells toll across the city. Another royal funeral, another moment of silence in a palace built on repetition. You keep moving because the story isn't done. Not even close. You're being pulled now, drawn deeper, as though the castle itself wants you to see the worst of it. You arrive in Madrid, the Alcazar, and you enter the chamber of the most infamous product of royal inbreeding. His name is Charles II of Spain. He's not here yet. You're early, but the room is already being prepared for him. The curtains are drawn to block the sun. His eyes are too sensitive. The rugs are thick, so his dragging footsteps won't echo. The servants move silently, trained to anticipate his sudden fits and half-coherent screams. And when he does appear, you are not ready. He's 19, but looks both younger and older. His jaw juts forward so far, he can barely close his mouth. His tongue is too large for his mouth. He drools. He stumbles. He cannot speak clearly. You watch the courtiers bow and lie. They call him Majesty. But you see the truth in their eyes? Charles II cannot rule. He can barely feed himself. And yet, he is king. Because there is no one else left. The Habsburg line has bred itself into a corner. No more sons. No more cousins that aren't also siblings or nieces. The blood is too thick now. You watch them parade him through court rituals like a puppet, a breathing symbol of a dynasty that has collapsed inward. He marries. They pick a young French princess, Marie-Louise of Orleans. She is 17, vibrant, confused. You follow her carriage through the gates, hear her laughter die in her throat as she meets her husband for the first time. She does her duty. She tries to love him. He tries to consummate the marriage, but he cannot. Years pass, no children come, and you hear the whispers grow louder. Witchcraft, some say. The queen is cursed. No one dares say the real reason, not out loud, but in the dark, you hear it everywhere. The blood, the blood, the blood. Historians still argue whether Charles II suffered from one disorder or many, whether his condition was a unique tragedy or an inevitable conclusion. But tonight, you don't need a diagnosis. You've walked the halls, you've seen the faces, you turn away from his chamber, heart heavy, air thick, stomach sour with the scent of incense and denial. And as you walk down the corridor, you pause once more, because you hear it, a faint lullaby, a nursery being prepared. For what? You wonder? For whom? You already know the answer. The next daughter, the next niece, the next bride. The story never rests. Not yet. You follow the sound of that lullaby, faint and haunting, like wind humming through a keyhole. It leads you down another corridor, one less adorned, more faded, where the colors on the wall have surrendered to the years. The footsteps of courtiers don't echo here. No visitors come, no celebrations disturb the dust. This is the part of the palace they don't show in portraits. This is where Charles II spent most of his life. You remember him from moments ago, the oversized tongue, the vacant eyes, the limp hand that struggled to wave. But what you didn't see then, you begin to feel now. The silence of isolation, the quiet of a mind that never quite connected the way it should. He is more ghost than king, and yet his presence saturates this wing like incense that never fades. You step into his study. There are books, ornate, untouched, letters, dictated, never written by his own hand. Maps, outdated, more decoration than information. The furniture is child-sized. He never grew fully into manhood. His body betrayed him before he understood how to use it. You sit beside the chair where he often slouched, and you try to imagine what it felt like, to rule an empire that everyone knew you couldn't lead. They dressed him in gold, but whispered behind their gloves. They bowed before him, but placed real power in the hands of ministers, wives, priests, and even they couldn't save him. You listen, and if you're still enough, you can almost hear his breathing, slow, uneven, sometimes catching on a cough that never fully clears. You rise and walk to the window. Outside, the people pray for rain, for harvest, for heirs. But Charles offers none of those, because his body isn't built for it. The court pretends. Oh, they try. They bathe him in holy water. They burn incense from Jerusalem. They ship in herbs from as far as India, boil roots, crush powders, smear his chest with oil and goat's milk. One doctor suggests powdered emeralds. Another offers a tonic made from rhino horn and pigeon hearts. You are there for all of it. You sit through the rituals, the bleeding sessions, the prayers shouted at his unconscious form. You watch the Queen, Marie-Louise, sit stiffly at the edge of the bed, hands in her lap, her youth already drained by the weight of watching him die slowly, but never completely. And the palace watches her, too, because she has one job: produce an heir. Every month, her cycle is recorded, analyzed, speculated over like a royal prophecy, and every month she disappoints. But the truth, lies not with her. You've seen the family tree. You've walked the halls. You've counted the names and the repeats. You've watched the line coil in on itself, until the child at the center of the web could hardly breathe without help. Charles is that child. You walk beside him again, this time at court. He moves slowly, like a puppet on strings. His ministers flank him on either side, nodding when he speaks, smiling when he mumbles something incomprehensible. The ambassadors bow, but their eyes dart around the room, as if looking for someone else. Anyone else. There's no one left. And so, the empire waits. For what? Exactly. Isn't clear. Maybe for a miracle. Maybe for the inevitable. You watch as Charles tries to ride a horse. He lasts 3 minutes before falling. The court cheers anyway. You're there when he collapses in church. His nose bleeds for an hour. A priest declares it a sign of divine transformation. You sit at the dinner table as he pokes at his food like a confused child, unsure how to eat what he's been served. He's 30 now. He looks 60. His hair is brittle. His spine curves unnaturally. His jaw juts so far forward he drools constantly. He cannot chew. His speech is garbled. Still, the family line presses on, because there is no plan B. Marie-Louise dies young, no children. Charles marries again, another niece, another hope, another failure. You watch her face during the wedding feast. She smiles, but not with her eyes. She knows. Everyone knows. Still, the cycle continues. It has to. There is too much power at stake, too many thrones balanced on this broken branch of a family tree. And so, you walk with him through the last years. Each month, his body weakens, his legs swell, his memory fades, his ministers take over entirely. The court is tense. Europe waits with bated breath, because the moment he dies, the game resets. You're in his chamber when the doctors, 10 of them, stand at the foot of his bed and argue quietly. One says his liver has collapsed. Another insists it's a blockage of the brain. A third mumbles something about curses. But no one says the real word: inbreeding. The king dies at age 38. When they autopsy him, quietly, discreetly, they find he has only one shrunken testicle. His heart is smaller than it should be. His lungs blackened. His intestines rotted. The royal physician, later, confesses in a hushed voice, "We found nothing inside him that was not entirely corrupted." You leave the chamber before they close his eyes, because you already know what happens next. The Spanish throne falls into chaos. Europe erupts. A war breaks out. And the bloodline, so carefully preserved, so aggressively protected, delivers exactly what it promised: silence. No heir, no strength, no future, just one name in the dark, echoing like a ghost through the velvet halls: Charles. The echo of his name fades behind you as you pass through a long gallery where the tapestries are faded, not from sunlight, but from forgetting. Here, the royal lineage doesn't end, it unravels, and though Charles II has finally died, the tangled web he leaves behind tightens across Europe like a corset pulled too tight. There is no applause, no relief, only silence and waiting. You find yourself in a council chamber where nobles from every corner of the continent whisper behind fans and folded hands. The air is sharp with anxiety, the kind that makes even seasoned diplomats sweat beneath powdered wigs. They're not here to mourn Charles. They're here to claim what remains of him. The problem is, they all think they deserve it. You glance over the letters stacked on the table. Claims from the Austrian Habsburgs, from the French Bourbons, from the Bavarian Wittelsbachs. Each one points to a family connection, a drop of blood, a long-dead aunt who married someone important. You know by now what those family trees look like? Less like trees, more like tangled vines choking each other in a marble pot. And at the center of it all sits a woman, Isabel Clara Eugenia. She's not young, she's not loud, but she's still here, born a century before Charles II. Her presence lingers like a pressed flower between the pages of a history book, faint, dry, but preserved. The daughter of Philip VI and Elizabeth of Valois, Isabel was raised more like a monk than a princess. Her youth was not spent at balls, but in chapels. She fasted more than she danced. Her letters mention God more than family. But she was a Habsburg, through and through. The jaw, the high forehead, the air of faded tragedy. You follow her through the royal convent where she chooses to live, cloistered yet crowned. She governs the Spanish Netherlands, not from a battlefield, but from behind latticed windows and veils of incense. A ruler wrapped in piety, a sovereign in silence. She never marries. Not officially. The court whispers that she took vows of chastity. Others say her father never trusted her to bear healthy children. You're not sure which truth is more bitter. Still, she rules, and the people love her. She walks the gardens in soft slippers, stopping to touch the petals of a rose with the same reverence her ancestors gave relics. She prays constantly. She writes letters in a firm, deliberate hand. She signs decrees with a cross drawn beside her name. And she watches Europe from a distance, like a nun watching lightning behind stained glass. But she can't avoid the truth. The same blood that runs through her runs through Charles, through Maria, through Margaret, through all of them. And she knows it. You catch a glimpse of her late at night, pacing the tiled floor of her study. Her hands twist the beads of her rosary, like she's trying to strangle the truth. The moonlight casts her shadow against the wall, long and narrow, like the family line itself. One of her attendants, a young novice with trembling hands, brings her a letter, another war, another cousin dead, another claim to another throne. She nods, doesn't flinch, doesn't pray louder, because she knows. She knows that the glory of her bloodline is a shadow now, that their once proud purity has birthed only grief, that the dynasty has become a maze with no exit, and that women like her, quiet, obedient, unfailingly faithful, are the only ones who still hold the pieces together. She doesn't cry, but you do, just a little, quietly, because you understand now what it meant to be born into this name, this jaw, this duty. You return with her to the chapel, where she kneels for hours. You sit in the pew behind her and watch the candlelight flicker on her profile. Her features are familiar. You've seen them repeated in 100 portraits, on 100 cousins, stretched thinner and thinner each time. She's the last of her kind who seems whole, not strong, not defiant. Just intact, you follow her until her final breath. She dies in her sleep, her fingers wrapped around her rosary, her expression serene. The convent rings no bells. The war is still going on, and Spain has no time to grieve a woman who wore no crown. But her story stays with you, because Isabel Clara Eugenia was the quiet culmination of a line that prayed harder than it rained. A ruler who carried the weight of generations of bad choices, without adding her own. Historians still argue whether she made any difference, whether her pious governance mattered in the long arc of empire. But tonight, you decide it did. Not because she saved the dynasty, but because she stopped it from crumbling faster. You rise from the chapel pew, your steps soft, and re-enter the echoing halls of a palace still pretending to be a kingdom. And just beyond the corridor, you see another wedding being arranged, another cousin on her way to court, another letter sealed with wax and false hope. You already know how it will end, but you keep walking, because the story hasn't let go of you yet. The chapel door closes behind you with a sigh. You leave Isabel Clara Eugenia to her sleep, her candles still burning low in the darkness, her rosary lying still where her hands once moved. But there is no time to linger. The halls are stirring again, soft footsteps, urgent whispers, the smell of starch and lavender filling the air. A new queen is arriving. You drift through the corridors toward the ceremonial courtyard, where courtiers gather under an overcast sky. The light is cold, pale, no trumpets sound, no dancers wait in silken lines. This wedding isn't a celebration, it's a transaction. You recognize her immediately, Maria Theresa of Spain, Another Maria, another niece, another bride for diplomacy. Her hair is pulled back so tightly her forehead shines. Her dress is a masterpiece, white and gold, stitched with pearls, a train that pools like melted butter behind her. She is 16, beautiful, fragile, prepared. Her father, Philip IV of Spain, hands her off like a treaty. Her husband is Louis XV of France, the Sun King himself, a cousin, naturally, a distant one, but still enough to keep the Habsburgs comfortable. You ride with her in the carriage to Versailles, bumping along roads thick with mud and ceremony. She says nothing. She stares out the window, eyes wide, knuckles pale. She knows what's expected, an heir, then another, then peace. But Versailles is not Madrid. The French court smells of rosewater and ambition. The rules are different. The language is sharp, the women sharper. Maria Theresa is not ready. You follow her through her first days, through the grand hall of mirrors, where her reflection follows her like a ghost, through the gardens, where noble women in towering wigs whisper behind embroidered fans. They smile to her face. They roll their eyes behind her back. She is slow, too formal, too Spanish. You sit beside her in her gilded chambers at night, as she practices French phrases under her breath, cheeks hot with shame. Her attendants fidget, her hairpins fall, her confidence withers. But she is queen, and her duty, like always, begins in the bedroom. Louis XIV is young, confident, and charming. In public. In private, he's impatient, restless, bored. The marriage is consummated, and soon after, she is with child. You hear the bells ringing for joy. A son is born, France celebrates, but he is sickly. Another child, another fragile body, another prayer whispered over a cradle. By the 5th pregnancy, Maria Theresa is weak, coughing blood into lace handkerchiefs between appearances. But Louis has moved on. His mistress, Madame de Montespan, has taken her place in every way but title. You find Maria Theresa sitting alone beneath a painted ceiling of angels. She watches as her husband laughs across the ballroom with another woman, her expression unreadable. There are no tantrums, no confrontations, just the quiet suffocation of dignity. She writes letters back to Spain, but they are filtered, rewritten, softened. She is a queen. She must not sound desperate. She dies young, not dramatically, not scandalously, just disappears. A quiet illness, a little blood, a slow fade. Her husband mourns her for one day. Then the court moves on. You stand before her portrait in Versailles, where she is painted tall, smiling faintly, one hand on the head of her firstborn. The jawline is unmistakable. The eyes, heavy-lidded. The body, already too frail beneath the satin. Historians still argue whether her marriage truly brought peace between France and Spain, or merely bought time for another war. But you know the truth. Maria Theresa didn't change history. She survived it. For a little while, you step back from the frame, your eyes catching another familiar name stitched into the royal household. Her daughter, her niece, her cousin. It's hard to keep track anymore. They all share the same names, the same eyes, the same fragile hands pressed to embroidered stomachs, hoping, just once, for a healthy child. You keep walking, another palace, another wedding, and then another collapse. You feel it before it happens, because by now, the signs are clear. You arrive in the court of Portugal, where the royals wear stiff collars and uneasy smiles. The throne here is smaller, but the family tree just as twisted. In fact, it shares more than roots with the Habsburgs. It shares branches. You meet Afonso VI, King of Portugal, and yet another product of too much closeness between cousins. He's born paralyzed on one side. His mind, they say, is unsteady. Some days he laughs for hours at nothing. Others, he stares blankly at walls, rocking slowly. His court doesn't know whether to fear him or pity him. He is crowned anyway, because he is the only son. His marriage to Marie-Françoise of Savoy is arranged quickly. A foreign bride, new blood, hope, but hope doesn't last long. You're in the room when she realizes her husband cannot speak clearly, when he fails to perform his duties as a husband, when she pleads with the church for annulment, it's granted, she marries his brother, and Portugal pretends none of it happened. You follow Afonso through the gardens, now exiled within his own palace. He mutters to himself, eyes unfocused, once a king, now a shadow. He dies alone, no heirs, no legacy. Another thread snapped. Historians debate whether his condition was neurological, psychological, or inherited. But again, the signs are there, in the jaw, in the eyes, in the silence. And now the silence stretches across Europe, like dusk descending over every court that still clings to the dream of pure blood. You close your eyes and listen to the prayers, to the bells, to the lullabies sung over cradles that never rock for long. And somewhere, down a corridor you haven't walked yet, a girl is being fitted for a wedding dress. You follow the sound of rustling silk and low murmurs, past tapestries that sag with age, past portraits that no longer pretend to smile. Somewhere up ahead, a seamstress hums as she tightens the bodice of a young girl's wedding gown. The melody is sweet, but the thread is tight, too tight. The girl winces, but doesn't speak. You've seen this before. You know how it ends. Her name is Anna of Austria, though there are several by that name. This one is delicate, small-boned. A princess trained to curtsy before she could walk, to smile through pain, and to sign her life away with a quill dipped in ink thick as blood. She is being prepared to marry Louis XVIII of France. Another cousin. Of course. You pause in the antechamber as her mother places a kiss on her forehead, not tender, but ceremonial. A gesture passed down like a title. The girl's face is powdered to hide the pallor beneath her cheeks, her lips tinted to suggest vitality. But you can see the tremble in her knees, the way her hands clutch her skirts to hide the sweat. She's 14. Louis is 15. Their marriage is celebrated as a triumph of diplomacy. Spain and France, united. At last, the endless wars might stop. Borders might blur into peace. But you know that's not what happens. You're there when she arrives in Paris, too foreign to be loved, too timid to be feared. She speaks Spanish. She prays too much. She dresses wrong. The court tolerates her, but never truly embraces her. And Louis, he barely acknowledges her. You walk beside her during endless dinners, seated beside a husband who stares past her like she's part of the furniture. He doesn't speak. He doesn't touch. He doesn't try. The courtiers whisper. They call her barren. But no one considers that maybe her husband isn't trying to plant anything at all. Years pass in cold silence. She grows thinner, quieter, always accompanied by chaperones, always watched. And then, unexpectedly, he comes to her. Perhaps it was political pressure, perhaps curiosity, perhaps loneliness. Regardless, she conceives. The court rejoices. A son is born. You stand beside the cradle as the wet nurse lifts the baby for all to see. The crowd cheers. Finally, an heir. But the baby doesn't cry much, doesn't move much. He has his mother's eyes, his father's nose, and that chin. You hold your breath. They name him Louis. Of course they do. Louis the 15th, the Sun King. The court basks in the glow of new hope. France is secure. But Anna, the queen, now a mother, doesn't shine with them. You sit with her in her private chambers, her hands folded tightly, her lips murmuring prayers long after the chapel bells have stopped. She knows. She always knew. She lives a life half in shadow, as her husband grows colder, more erratic. He disappears for days. He surrounds himself with favorites, men who gossip, who jostle for influence, who push her further to the margins. Eventually, he dies. Unexpected illness, they say. Anna is made regent for her son, now only 5 years old. At last, she holds power, real power, but it doesn't feel like triumph, it feels like aftermath. She governs with Cardinal Mazarin at her side, a man as strategic as he is discreet. Together, they navigate civil war, assassination attempts, famine. France is not kind to queens, even the ones who rule well. You watch her age not in decades, but in weeks. Her once golden hair fades. Her posture bends beneath the weight of decisions that never truly feel hers. Still, she endures. But her son, the bright burn-in boy, he grows into something else, something sharper. Louis XIV becomes everything she wasn't. Loud, proud, terrifyingly confident. He builds Versailles. He demands absolute loyalty. He absorbs France like sunlight swallowing shadow. And Anna, she retreats, bit by bit. She vanishes into the corners of his court, her voice no longer needed, her counsel no longer wanted. You find her in a cloistered hallway, watching her son walk past in gilded robes. He does not look at her. She says nothing. She is used to that. Historians still argue whether Anna of Austria was a good regent, a clever queen, or simply a placeholder. But here, in the quiet places where the candlelight stutters and the past breathes more than the present, you understand her truth. She was a link in the chain, a necessary bridge, and yet another woman asked to sacrifice everything for a bloodline that never thanked her. You walk with her to her final breath, not in splendor, not in pain, just stillness. They bury her in Saint Denis, beside the kings who never loved her. You visit her tomb, running your fingers along the carved stone letters of her name, Anna Regina. No dates, no details, just a title. You step back, letting the dust settle, and then you hear it again. The rustle of skirts, the snap of gloves, the preparations for yet another wedding, another niece, another cousin, another heir, because the line must continue, even when it shouldn't, even when everyone knows. And so, you turn down another corridor, because there's still more to see, still more to remember, still more stories tangled in the silence. The corridor ahead narrows again, as if history itself is constricting. The walls seem closer here, closer than before, and the ceiling feels lower, like the palace is exhaling after centuries of holding its breath. The portraits shrink too, no longer towering oil masterpieces, but smaller, simpler, more intimate. The faces are younger, the gaze is softer, but the blood is the same. You've arrived in Bavaria. The Habsburgs have married into many kingdoms, Spain, France, Portugal, but here in southern Germany, their bloodline weaves quietly through a smaller, colder court. And tonight, it leads you to another woman with too many titles and not enough choices. Her name is Maria Anna of Bavaria. And even before you see her, you know what she'll look like. The same pale skin, the same high forehead, the same jaw that doesn't quite belong on a girl her age. You find her sitting in a chamber draped with tapestries of hunting scenes, lions, deer, dogs frozen mid-leap. Her eyes are fixed on nothing. A book rests in her lap, unopened. She's engaged to her uncle. Naturally, Ferdinand the Soup Holy Roman Emperor. He is 20 years older. She is his niece on both sides. Her parents were first cousins, both descended from earlier Habsburgs. You can feel your head spinning as you try to map it out. The names double back, the branches loop again. The family tree isn't a tree anymore. It's a crown of thorns. You watch Maria Anna during the wedding ceremony. She doesn't tremble. She doesn't cry. She just stands still, her hands folded, eyes glassy. Someone places a veil over her head. Someone else whispers a prayer. And just like that, her life becomes property. They say she's clever, fluent in multiple languages, pious, dutiful, but none of that matters. She is here to breed, and that she does. She bears 8 children. Most of them survive, which, in this dynasty, is a miracle. You walk through the nursery with her, where embroidered cribs line the walls like miniature coffins. The air is thick with lavender and powdered milk. Wet nurses coo, midwives whisper. The babies, some healthy, some not, rest in stillness. One of them, a boy, catches your eye. He is thin, but alert. His eyes follow the candlelight. His fingers twitch in time with the lullaby. A nurse hums from the corner. His name is Ferdinand III. He will inherit his father's crown. He will marry his cousin. And one day, his grandson will die childless, ending this particular thread of the Habsburg line. But for now, he sleeps, and Maria Anna watches over him with a gaze you can't quite name. Not pride, not fear, something more like endurance. You step into her private chapel, where she kneels alone most mornings, surrounded by wood carvings of saints who look just a little too much like her cousins. She lights a candle. She closes her eyes. She murmurs the same prayers her mother once said, the same ones her daughter will whisper in turn. You wonder if she ever truly believes she was chosen by God, or if she's just trying to survive him. You see her at court, too, playing her part flawlessly, smiling at diplomats, writing letters in neat Latin, hosting feasts while hiding pregnancies under brocade skirts. She becomes empress, quietly, almost invisibly. And when plague comes to Vienna, she opens her kitchens to feed the poor. She sends priests to bless the sick. She prays harder, but even her prayers have limits. One of her daughters dies at 4, fever, another at birth. Still, the court mourns, but not for long. There are more daughters to marry, more alliances to forge. You pause beside a mirror in her chamber. She stands before it, adjusting a jeweled necklace around her pale neck. Her reflection looks tired. She adjusts her veil, smiles once, a smile that doesn't reach her eyes, then turns away. Historians still argue whether Maria Anna was a powerful figure in her own right or merely a mother of emperors, whether she held real influence or just wore it like a borrowed cloak. But you feel the truth pressing against the windows. She was another woman who gave her body to history, and history took everything it wanted. You walk with her to the end. She dies quietly. No scandal, no collapse, just exhaustion. They say she passed in her sleep. You believe it? Because by then, even her bones must have been tired. They place her in the imperial crypt beneath Vienna, among dozens of others whose names loop like prayers gone stale. Her tomb is plain, her name carved beside her husband's. The air down there is cold, still, and smells faintly of metal and old incense. You linger. She deserved more, you think, but she knew she wouldn't get it. And above you, in the palace, another young girl is learning to smile without joy. You follow her footsteps down another hall, where portraits now bear French lace instead of Spanish ruffles. The hairstyles are taller, the corsets tighter, but the chins, oh, The chins, they remain unchanged. You hear the rustle of a fan snapping shut, the click of shoes on marble, another name waiting for a crown. You're not surprised, not anymore. You trail behind the sound of footsteps that never rush, only glide, slow, measured, like the pacing of a clock running out of time. You pass portraits that blend into one another, names repeating like refrains in an old hymn: Maria, Anna, Isabella, Teresa. The gowns shift, the jewelry sparkles, but the eyes remain the same, wide, tired, and distant. Tonight, you arrive at a table where maps are laid out like battlefield shrouds. This is not a nursery, not a wedding hall. This is where kingdoms are carved, and women are bartered. You stand just behind the men who point to lines, names, and dowries as if they are pieces of furniture. They are preparing another match. This one will link France and Spain again. Another merger, another niece, another cousin, and at the center of it all, a girl barely tall enough to reach the ink pot. Her name is Maria Anna of Spain, daughter of Philip III, and yes, you've met her before, in name, in blood, in repetition. This time, she's being prepared to marry Ferdinand III, her double cousin. Her father and Ferdinand's mother are siblings. Her mother and Ferdinand's father are siblings. You try to trace the connection and nearly lose yourself in the spiral. You visit her on the eve of departure. She's 17, wrapped in silks that weigh more than her shoulders can bear. Her trunks are packed, her letters signed. She is ready, but not really. She doesn't cry. She doesn't speak much either. She's been trained not to. Instead, she listens to her tutors, to her confessors, to the rustle of her own heartbeat inside a gilded cage. The wedding takes place with all the usual ceremony: golden carriages, trumpets, choirs. Everyone remarks how beautiful she is, delicate, regal, demure. But you see the flicker of fear behind her eyes. You've seen it before. You'll see it again. Her husband is 27, tall, formal, cold. Their first night together is quiet, too quiet. He doesn't speak. She doesn't ask. But the line must continue, so the effort begins. She conceives. She delivers. A stillborn girl, then a boy. He lives, but only just. He coughs through infancy, feverish and small, and nurses whisper that his bones feel like reeds in the bathwater. Another child, and another. Some survive, most do not. You walk with Maria Anna through the halls of the Hofburg Palace, her arms often empty, her steps always hushed. She wears black often, more often than seems fair for her age. Her health begins to mirror her children's, frail, brittle, failing. And yet, she smiles at court, she greets ambassadors, she bows before relics. She hosts processions that last long into the night, her corset pulled so tight you wonder how she breathes. She is everything they want her to be. But the cracks show. One evening, you find her in the winter chapel, alone. The candles are out. Her shoes lie discarded beside her. She sits on the cold marble floor, her hands pressed flat to the stone, as if trying to steady the spinning inside her. No one finds her like this. No one is allowed to. You sit beside her, even if she doesn't see you. The silence is heavy, like a confession without words. She loses another child the next week. The funeral is brief. The court has become efficient at mourning. She returns to her duties 2 days later, because that's what queens do. Historians still argue whether Maria Anna had influence in court, whether she truly supported the 30 Years' War, or simply endured it from a gilded cage. But you know the truth is simpler. She was a vessel, beautiful, breakable, necessary. Her legacy lives on, not through words or decrees, but through another son who will go on to rule. and eventually to marry another cousin. You follow her into her final years, where the vibrance fades completely. Her hair turns gray before 40. Her eyes stay downcast, not from modesty, but from fatigue. She dies of cancer, they say, or despair, or both. You visit her tomb in Vienna, another Habsburg buried in the Capuchin crypt beneath layers of marble and incense. Her coffin sits beside her husband's, beneath sculpted cherubs and rusted crowns. No one remembers the girl who sat barefoot in the chapel, but you do. You emerge once more into the palace corridors. The light dimmer now, the air colder, the halls are quieter. The portraits have changed again, powdered wigs, heavier fabrics, more elaborate embroidery. The women are still pale, still wide-eyed, still doomed, but now they carry something else, exhaustion woven into their very skin. You pause before a new face. It's familiar, even if you've never seen it before. That chin, those eyes, the slight asymmetry of a family line stretched too thin, folded too often. She smiles faintly. You step closer and realize you don't even need to ask her name. You already know it. You linger before her portrait, and though her name isn't carved beneath the frame, her identity whispers from the folds of her gown, the tilt of her head, the heavy necklace resting just above a heart that likely beat itself into early silence. She is beautiful, yes, but the kind of beauty shaped by symmetry that has become too perfect, too deliberate, as if the artist knew what was expected and painted it anyway. Jaw and all. Her name is Maria Antonia of Austria, though some will know her better by a title she never truly held, Queen of France. You turn, and she is standing in the center of her wedding chamber, her dress stiff with silver embroidery, a garland of orange blossoms in her dark hair. She's just 16, and already, the courtiers murmur that she is delicate, not in the way poets mean, but in the way doctors whisper behind closed doors. She is the daughter of Leopold I, Holy Roman Emperor, and Margaret Teresa of Spain, herself the product of close cousin marriage. That makes Maria Antonia, by blood, more concentrated than most royal liqueurs. Her Habsburg features are undeniable. Her health, questionable. Her purpose, clear. She is to marry Louis the Grand Dauphin, son of Louis XIV, another cousin, another alliance, the Bourbon-Habsburg merger. You sit beside her as she signs the marriage contract, with a quill too large for her small fingers. Every name on the page is familiar. Her father's, her uncle's, her cousin's, sometimes the same man twice. The wedding is grand. Versailles is decked in gold and perfume. She walks beneath archways of roses and chandeliers meant to outshine the stars. But nothing shines quite enough to distract from what everyone is quietly thinking. Will she survive long enough to bear a son? She tries and tries. You follow her through the long corridors of Versailles, past rooms so ornate they almost look like churches. She glides like a shadow, quieter than the bells, more graceful than the women who envy her. But she grows thinner, her eyes grow dull, her cough worsens. Still, she fulfills her duty. A son is born, frail, but alive. The court cheers, but Maria Antonia does not. You see her in the nursery, alone, watching her child sleep beneath a canopy of lace. Her hands rest on the edge of the crib, fingers twitching with every whimper. She does not sing to him. She only watches, as if waiting for him to vanish. He doesn't. Not yet. But she begins to vanish instead. Her appetite fades. Her skin grows gray in places where powder cannot reach. She walks less. She sleeps more. Her maids whisper. The queen looks the other way. The doctors come. They prescribe steam baths, herbal teas, rest, leeches, prayer. It does nothing. Maria Antonia dies at age 23. The official cause? Tuberculosis. The unofficial one? Her blood. Historians still argue whether her frailty came from disease or design, whether the line had simply doubled back too far, whether it was nature or nurture, or both. You step away from her grave in Saint-Denis, where she is buried far from her birthplace, far from her mother, and far from the truth of why she never stood a real chance. But her son lives, and through him, the line continues. You turn now to the Bavarian court once more. The Habsburgs are still weaving themselves into every royal house that will take them. And one by one, you watch the women arrive, each bearing the same polite smile, the same perfectly arranged hair, the same echo of someone you've already met. You arrive just in time to witness Maria, Josepha of Bavaria, betrothed to Joseph II, son of Maria Theresa and heir to the Holy Roman Empire. Another tidy match, another cousin, another step deeper into the same circle. She's nervous on her wedding night. You feel it in her breath, in the way she fidgets with her sleeves. But Joseph is gentle. For once, the marriage doesn't begin in cruelty, and yet it ends in tragedy. She dies in childbirth at age 16. Joseph is never the same. He marries again and again, but no wife bears him a living heir. The court writes off Maria Josepha as a sad footnote, a minor queen. But you remember her, just like you remember all the others. You walk now through an antechamber filled with mirrors. Their reflections multiply you into hundreds of silhouettes. And for a moment, you swear each one is a different woman. Margaret, Maria, Anna, Isabel, all standing shoulder to shoulder, each with the same face and the same fate. And just beyond the door, another match is being arranged. You don't need to open it to know what's inside. The letters are already signed. The trunks are already packed. The dress is already sewn. The air thickens as you move toward that unopened door, the one hiding another ceremony, another beginning already fated to end. You don't have to see it to know how it unfolds. The same procession of powdered wigs and velvet gloves. The same vows spoken by trembling lips. The same audience watching not with joy, but with expectation. Inside, a young woman lowers her eyes as a ring is slid onto her finger. Her name is Maria Carolina of Austria, and she is next. The 13th daughter of Maria Theresa and Francis I. Maria Carolina is born into a family that treats children like chess pieces, and daughters like queens in waiting. Her mother, the formidable Empress of Austria, has already married off several sisters to kings and emperors, each one meant to stitch the Habsburg name tighter into the map of Europe. You pass a hallway in the Schönbrunn Palace where portraits of the sisters hang in a neat line. Blonde curls, blue sashes, painted perfection. All of them married young. Most of them married sick. You pause in front of Maria Carolina's likeness. The artist has captured the best version of her. Rosy cheeks, clever eyes, a steady chin. But you recognize the signs anyway. The too high forehead, the jaw with just a bit too much definition, the symmetry that borders on unnatural. She is sent to Naples at 18. Her marriage to Ferdinand IV, cemented not with romance, but with treaties and dowries. Another cousin, another throne. She doesn't cry on the carriage ride south. She doesn't speak much either, like her sisters before her. She's learned to keep her heart behind her teeth. Naples is warmer than Vienna, brighter, louder, but the court is no gentler. Ferdinand is simple. Some call him coarse. Others say he's childlike. He's certainly uninterested in courtly manners. Or his wife. Maria Carolina quickly realizes she will be ruling alone in everything but name. You follow her through the marble halls of the royal palace of Caserta, her skirts brushing against marble that gleams like glass. She speaks with ministers. She writes foreign policy. She consults with diplomats in the dead of night. And all the while, she is expected to bear children. She does. 18 of them. 7 die in infancy. Others follow, slowly, fevers, coughs, twitches that never go away, stillbirths with names that never get spoken again. You lose track after the 12th. She doesn't. She carries them all, even the ones the world forgets. One daughter lives long enough to be married off to France, Maria Antonia. You'll know her later by another name, Marie Antoinette. You hear the bells of Versailles echo all the way to Naples. Another Habsburg girl sent to a foreign court, powdered and corseted and sacrificed. The blood spreads like smoke. Maria Carolina rules Naples with a sharp tongue and a mind sharper than any of the men she must tolerate. She builds hospitals, opens libraries, sponsors artists, but her strength doesn't save her children. One by one, they grow weak, thin-limbed, quiet. You visit her nursery on a rainy evening. 3 children lie in their beds, coughing. A 4th stares at the ceiling, unmoving. The doctor speaks softly in Latin, not for privacy, but to pretend it's something holy. She sits in the corner, expression unreadable, not cold, just practiced. You want to ask her how many graves she's stood beside, but you don't, because you already know the number is more than she'll ever say aloud. Historians still argue whether Maria Carolina ruled with wisdom or cruelty, whether her politics pushed Naples into chaos, or whether chaos was already waiting. But in these quiet rooms, where the curtains are drawn and the candlelight flickers, you see her for what she truly was, a survivor in a palace of ghosts. A woman told to smile while burying half her bloodline. She outlives many of her children. She watches her sister, Marie Antoinette, be dragged through the streets of Paris, hair shorn, dignity torn to ribbons. She receives the news of the guillotine without a sound, but she doesn't forget. She never forgets. She declares war on France, not just for politics, for revenge. And still, the children die. One of her sons collapses at 21. Another suffers seizures from the age of 3. Another is born with limbs that won't bend. Each time, the midwives whisper, "It must be the will of God." But she knows. She knows. It's the blood. It's always the blood. You find her in old age, wrapped in furs, seated near a window she barely looks through anymore. Her once bright hair is faded, her voice reduced to whispers, but her hands still twitch, restless, always reaching for something she can't fix. They bury her beside her husband, though she ruled more than he ever did. The inscription says she was queen consort, but you know better. You step out into the Neapolitan air, the sea wind sharp against your face. Somewhere beyond the garden walls, the city moves on, but in here, in these echoing halls, the cycle continues. Another daughter waits, another cousin approaches, another name will be repeated, because for the Habsburgs, history isn't something they learn, it's something they live, over and over again. The sea breeze fades behind you as you leave Naples, and the corridors of empire narrow once more. You are moving through time now, not just place, stone turning to marble, marble turning to dust. The portraits are newer here, but they still carry the weight of all that came before. The eyes remain familiar, so do the names. The Bourbon-Habsburg merger is no longer a single marriage. It has become a dynasty of its own, 2 once mighty houses braided together, tighter and tighter, until there is hardly room left to breathe. You find yourself back in Spain, where the Habsburg line, once thought extinguished, has been replaced by a branch that looks nearly the same. The Bourbons now sit on the throne, but the blood they carry, still Habsburg, still looping. and the woman who walks these halls tonight, Maria Luisa of Parma. Her name may not be as familiar, but her story is written in the same ink: quiet sacrifice, unspoken sorrow, and a body demanded to serve more than it was ever built to bear. She marries Charles IV of Spain, her cousin on multiple lines. Their union is arranged when she is just 13, sealed by a handshake between fathers and a map reshaped by men in powdered wigs. When you meet her, she is 17 and already a queen in training. She enters the Spanish court like a candle in a room full of smoke, soft, vulnerable, already flickering. The court is a tangle of formality and rot, layers of etiquette so thick you can't tell whether anyone is breathing. You follow Maria Luisa as she tries to find her place within it. She curtsies too deeply. She laughs at the wrong time. Her Italian is too loud. Her French, too casual. They call her foreign. But you know what they mean. She hasn't yet learned to disappear. She learns quickly. By her 3rd year, she speaks only when spoken to. By her 4th, she has conceived her first child. By her 5th, she is buried too. The rhythm begins: birth, death, silence, birth, death, mourning, birth, survival, barely. You walk beside her through the endless loop of motherhood, the whispering midwives, the linen stained red, the cradle too quiet. Her hands tremble, her posture stiffens. She stops asking the names of the children they take away. Still, she fulfills her duty. She gives birth 24 times. Yes, 24. Only a handful survive into adulthood. You find her writing letters late at night, not to her husband, he barely speaks to her, but to her daughter, her sisters, herself, letters full of grace, of fatigue, of faith she may not believe in anymore. She grows sharper as she ages, less timid, less pliable. Some call her domineering, others call her cunning. But you can see the truth in her face. She's just done being helpless. You see it in the way she navigates her husband's moods, the way she places loyal ministers in key positions, the way she mothers the court while burying her own children. Still, she ages faster than she should. The lines on her face deepen with each funeral. Her smile becomes something carved, not lived. One of her surviving sons is Ferdinand VII, and when you look into his eyes, you see her, tired, watchful, already resigned. He will marry his cousin, of course, and his daughter, another cousin again. But you're getting ahead of yourself. Back in Maria Luisa's court, the walls grow colder. Revolution brews in France, and Spain tightens its grip on tradition. You follow her as she navigates crisis after crisis, her throne shaking, her people starving, her own body barely holding together. She develops a limp, then swelling in her joints. Rheumatism, they call it. She spends her final years carried in a chair, wrapped in layers of lace and fur, her fingers too stiff to hold a quill, but she watches, still. She sees Napoleon rise. She watches as her husband is manipulated, her son turned into a pawn. She watches Spain fall under foreign control, her people rebel, her name vilified, and still. She does not break, not publicly, not completely. Historians still argue whether Maria Luisa was a schemer, a matriarch, or merely a woman doing what she had to in a house built to break women. But you've walked these halls, you've watched her bleed, you've counted her children, those who lived, those who didn't, and you know. She was another bearer of the legacy, another thread in the tapestry, another woman asked to keep the line going, even when the line no longer made sense. She dies in exile, no throne, no fanfare, no rest, just silence. And after her, a court returns to Madrid with a new queen, a younger one. The cycle resumes. You pass another window. The light is different now, cooler, grayer. History is beginning to close in on itself. But there are still more names, still more daughters, still more jaws painted carefully in portraits to look noble instead of wrong. You hear fabric swish behind you, another gown, another girl, another name you already know. The hem of her gown drags softly across the marble, and you follow it as though it might lead to something different this time, something new. But the weight of generations pulls the fabric down, and with it, the girl wearing it. Her name is Maria Isabella of Spain, and her fate, like the silk trailing behind her, has already been woven. She's the daughter of Charles IV and Maria Luisa of Parma, the same Maria Luisa whose body bore more children than most could name. The same Maria Luisa whose hands tremble from too many funerals. You can almost hear the echo of her sighs each time she signed off another child's future to a cousin. Maria Isabella is barely past childhood when her match is arranged. The groom, Francis I of the two Sicilies, her cousin, naturally. You are there as she boards the ship to Naples, her veil pulled low over her face, her fingers gripping the rail so tightly her knuckles turn white. The wind lifts her skirts as the waves slap against the hull, and she doesn't look back. She already knows what's behind her. What waits ahead isn't much different. The Neapolitan court is grand, but brittle. Golden mirrors on cracked walls, perfume courtiers hiding stained gloves. And the king, Francis, is stiff, devout, and already exhausted by the weight of his own lineage. Their marriage is quiet, no love story, no scandal, just duty. She bears 12 children. 12. You walk with her through nursery after nursery, through cradle after cradle. Some babies cry, some never do. Some grow quiet after just a few months. And still, she smiles in portraits. Always that smile, too still, too practiced. She hosts balls, attends operas, dresses in layers of lace so heavy she can hardly sit. Her letters are polite, full of thanks and small nothings. But the ink smudges in places where her hands shake. You find her one evening staring at a portrait of her mother. The resemblance is haunting. Same high cheekbones, same hollowed cheeks, same sadness behind painted eyes. But Maria Isabella isn't just following her mother's path. She's repeating it. And now, the cracks begin to show. Not just in her, but in the children. You watch one son stumble when he walks. Another loses hearing before he learns to speak. One daughter's eyes never focus. Another child is born gray and silent. The court doesn't question it. They never do. They whisper about illness, about fate, about God's will. But no one says the word that you know is thrumming just under the surface. Inbreeding. The portraits try to lie. The sculptors soften the jawlines. The painters narrow the chins. But the truth still finds its way into the frame. You see it. Anyone looking closely would. And now, for the first time, the cracks are beginning to reach the surface of power itself. You follow Maria Isabella into middle age. She becomes heavier, slower. Her dresses are darker now. Mourning becomes her permanent wardrobe. Her smiles fade from paintings. Her children grow up or don't. And the ones that do are married off, as always. And the line continues, like a wheel with a broken spoke, still turning. She dies at 41. Some say it was a stomach illness. Others say it was exhaustion. But by now, you've watched enough to know. It was the same thing that killed all the rest. Just slower. Just quieter. Another queen gone. Another child taking her place. You leave the palaces behind for a moment, just a moment, and step out into the air. The world outside is changing. Revolutions stir. Nations rise. People begin to question the divine right of kings. But not in these halls. In here, time stands still. You step into another wedding procession. The girl is younger now, barely 15. Her name? Maria Cristina of the Two Sicilies, daughter of Maria Isabella, granddaughter of Maria Luisa, another product of cousins marrying cousins. And now she is to marry Ferdinand VII of Spain. Yes, her uncle. This is not a metaphor. Her actual biological uncle. You feel the nausea rise in your throat as you stand beside the altar. The archbishop drones on. The courtiers smile, brittle as glass. Maria Christina's eyes are wide, but not with awe, with fear. But there's no choice. There never is. She marries him. She bears him 2 daughters. One of them, Isabella II, will become Queen of Spain as a child, yet another girl burdened with a throne, a name, and a bloodline that's been bent out of shape. You watch Maria Cristina try to hold the country together after Ferdinand's death. Spain is splintering. The people are restless. Civil wars erupt. Liberals and absolutists tear the map apart. She rules as regent, but the crown no longer guarantees obedience. And still, she clings to it. Because what else is there? You watch her fall from power, then claw her way back, then lose it again. The people turn on her. Her court shrinks. The air thickens with suspicion. She dies in exile, not as a queen, not as a hero, just another widow of a collapsing system. Historians still debate whether she was ambitious, manipulative, or merely a victim of her circumstances. You don't debate. You've seen enough. The lines on the family tree are no longer straight. They tangle, blur, loop, and eventually fade. But not yet. You walk the final stretch of the corridor. One more face, one more girl. You already know her name. You've known it from the beginning. You pause before the final portrait, not because it's the most tragic, but because it's the most familiar. The frame is gold, ornate but chipped in one corner. The varnish has yellowed. The canvas is cracked at the edges from too many seasons and too many forgotten halls. But the eyes, those eyes, still follow you as though they've been waiting. Her name is Isabella II of Spain, and this time, she's not just a daughter, she's the queen. She inherits the throne at age 3. You stand at her coronation, a child lifted onto velvet, dwarfed by robes she can barely carry. Her crown doesn't rest, it presses. And already, the whispers begin. She's too young, too weak, too female. But more than that, her blood is wrong. Everyone knows it. You follow her through childhood, a parade of tutors and bishops and governesses who speak of destiny while their eyes flicker with doubt. She learns to write in long, ornate Spanish. She learns to kneel correctly, to blink slowly, to smile without showing teeth. She learns how to be watched. She becomes queen in name, but the court rules behind her. Regents speak in her place. Men argue over her future while she stares out the palace windows. And soon, inevitably, they begin to speak of marriage. She's not even 13. The options are laid out like a banquet. Dukes, princes, cousins, always Habsburg or Bourbon or both. She marries Francisco de Assis, Duke of Cadiz, her double first cousin. That means they share both sets of grandparents. Both of their family trees fold like paper fans. And when you see their wedding portrait, you feel the exhaustion set in. He is pale, frail. She is young, already resigned. Their union is not a love story. It's a paperwork exercise with a velvet overlay. You hear the rumors immediately. He is sickly. She is frustrated. He prefers the company of men. She prefers distance. And still, the pressure mounts. An heir, a child, a symbol that this cursed line can keep going. She delivers her first son 2 years into the marriage. But the court doesn't celebrate. They speculate. The child doesn't resemble his father, not at all. And so the rumors deepen. Was he fathered by a lover, a guard, a count? The court pretends not to notice, but you hear it in every hallway, feel it in every frost-laced glance. It doesn't matter. He's crowned Alfonso XIII anyway, because someone has to sit on the throne. Isabella rules in the chaos of a nation unraveling. Spain is fractured. Wars rage between liberals and conservatives, monarchists and republicans. Revolts flare, governments collapse, assassinations swirl like summer storms, and she, still young, still pale, is trying to hold it all. But she isn't strong enough. She tries reforms. She changes ministers. She tours cities. She baptizes babies. She prays in public. She pardons enemies. It's never enough. Her face appears on coins that no one trusts. Her name is spoken in public with a mix of reverence and ridicule. You walk beside her through a palace where rooms are now half empty, where guards are replaced weekly, where the scent of dust and gunpowder mingles in the air. And finally, the people turn. A revolution forces her into exile. She flees to France, her carriage trailing mud across the border. No trumpets, no farewells, just the sound of everything collapsing behind her. She is only 38. She lives the rest of her life as a ghost of a queen, wandering salons in Paris, her jewels pawned, her name reduced to political caution. She abdicates the throne in favor of her son. Alfonso takes the crown. For a time, the monarchy breathes again, but it never fully recovers. It never could. The line is too weak. The people are too tired. The world has changed. And the blood, it's spent. You visit her grave decades later, in El Escorial. She lies in the royal pantheon, tucked between kings and queens who stared down the same fate. Her tomb is marked with her full title, her regnal dates, and nothing else. No mention of exile, no mention of what the blood took from her, no mention of how long she carried a crown too heavy for any child. Historians still argue whether Isabella II was a bad queen or simply born too late, whether she failed Spain or Spain failed her. But you don't argue. You've seen enough. The portraits are quiet now. The corridors, still. You glance around at all the women you've met on this journey. Margaret, Joanna, Maria Anna, Isabella, Anna of Austria, Maria Theresa, Maria Carolina, Maria Luisa, Maria Christina, Maria Antonia, Maria Isabella, each with the same face carved in different ways, each born into a system that couldn't be sustained. They weren't weak, they were sacrificed, generation after generation, to preserve a name, to protect a legacy, to keep the blood pure. But the price was too high. The line has snapped now, not with thunder, but with a whimper. No more double cousin marriages, no more uncle-niece weddings, no more portraits hiding the truth. The silence is final, and in that silence, you realize the story is ending, but you have one last corridor to walk, just one more. The final corridor is unlike the others. There are no portraits here, no velvet drapes, no golden candelabras casting soft shadows onto marble floors. Just plain stone, worn, gray, and silent. The air carries a cool stillness, like the deep breath a room takes when its story is finally done. You walk slowly, your footsteps hushed, not by force, but by instinct. This is where the bloodline ends, not with screams or glory, but with a sigh. You reach the last chamber, and there she is, the final daughter. Her name is Eugenia de Montijo, born centuries after Joanna, after Maria Theresa, after all the Marias and Annas and Isabellas. She is not a Habsburg by name, but by blood. Yes, always by blood. the last of that old world still flowing through veins that tried to adapt, but never fully escaped what they carried. And though Eugenia does not sit on a Spanish throne, she marries into one just as gilded, Empress of the French, wife to Napoleon III. You see her now in a Paris salon, wrapped in silk, her hair coiled high, her voice measured and intelligent. She is sharp, observant, determined, but behind her gaze, you see it, that same ancestral shadow curling beneath her skin. She walks differently from the others, not toward power, but through it. She's not a pawn. She's not a girl wed at 14 to an uncle she's never met. She chooses. She plays the game. And for a time, she wins. But even she cannot escape the weight of legacy. She bears a single son, the last Bonaparte heir, and the last true branch of this twisted dynasty to stretch into the modern age. You visit their home at Chislehurst, in England, where they live after exile. The grandeur is gone, the laughter, gone. Eugenia sits by the window, watching rain fall on unfamiliar soil. She has lost her throne, her empire, her name, but nothing breaks her like what comes next. Her son, Napoleon Eugène, joins the British Army. He dreams of glory, of restoring the family's honor. He dies in Africa, ambushed, mutilated. His body is sent home in a coffin too small for his legacy. And with him, the line is truly, undeniably gone. No heirs, no more. You sit beside Eugenia as she receives the news. Her hand does not tremble. Her breath doesn't catch. She simply closes her eyes and does not open them for a long time. Years pass. She never remarries. She never returns. She grows old. She walks slowly through English gardens where no one knows her name. She wears black long after mourning is expected. She speaks softly in Spanish, in French, in the language of women who have buried too many things to count. And when she dies, at the age of 94, she leaves behind no throne, no son, no crown, just silence. You leave her grave behind and walk back through time, not forward, not backward, through centuries of repetition, through daughters groomed to die in childbirth, through queens who were queens in name only, through girls who learned to smile while their bodies were used like ink on parchment, signatures on treaties, vessels for names too important to fail. You've seen them all now. You've stood at their bedsides, walked their halls, read their letters, sat beside their cribs and cradles and coffins, and you understand. The inbreeding wasn't a mistake. It was a choice, over and over again. A choice made for politics, for pride, for a lineage that was so afraid of impurity that it poisoned itself from within. The Habsburg jaw wasn't just a feature. It was a warning. Each woman bore it like a watermark, passed through blood and prayer, corsets and ceremony. And when their bodies broke, the court said they were weak, but you know better. They were survivors, until they couldn't survive anymore. Historians still argue, because they always do. They say, well, we can't judge them by modern standards. Or, it was all about politics, not biology. Or, it wasn't really their fault. But none of those things matter to the girl wearing a velvet crown while bleeding alone in a darkened chamber. None of those things matter to the child prince who never learns to walk. None of those things matter to the woman who buries 18 children and is still expected to host a ball the next morning. You step back into the center of the hall now, where no portraits hang, where the stone walls are bare, where the last name has been spoken. You feel the air lighten, the silence deepen, because there is no one left to carry the line. It has folded in on itself until nothing remains. And yet, the story lingers in the jawlines of old paintings, in the names carved in Latin on crumbling tombs, in the whispered lullabies sung over silent cradles. The dynasty is gone, but its echo stays, a soft breath in the dark, a final curtsy, and now, at last, you may rest. You sit now in the quiet of this long, winding story, its final pages turned, its last echoes fading into stillness. The halls behind you, once filled with footsteps and whispers and wedding bells, are empty. The portraits no longer watch. The tapestries hang motionless in the hush. Outside, night has fully settled. The stars blink gently above palaces that no longer house queens. Above graves carved with titles no one speaks aloud. Time, patient and soft, has finally smoothed the sharpest corners. The names that once shaped empires have grown quiet. The lines, broken, the crowns, tarnished. You exhale, a long breath. Unhurried, you've traveled far, through centuries and countries, from grand ballrooms to cold stone crypts. You've met daughters who were born to rule, but raised only to serve. You've stood beside queens who held kingdoms on their backs and children in their arms, too many of whom never drew breath. You've seen how a family's fear of dilution became a curse whispered from generation to generation. But now, the story sleeps. You are no longer in a palace. You are in your room, safe, still. The past has folded itself away, like old lace in a cedar drawer, and the silence is no longer heavy. It is soft, like velvet, like dusk. Let it hold you, let your breath slow. The lights are low, the world outside has quieted, and you, gentle listener, have nothing left to carry. Close your eyes, sink into the hush, let the story drift into dream.